Let's try that again since I was muted. Welcome to the Spiritual Speakeasy, where all spirits are always served and the bar is always open. Tonight's guest is Akasha, the owner of the Wild Rose Society. She is a holistic health minister midwife who combines goddess spirituality and midwifery practices to assist women in bringing life into the world and breathing life back into themselves. Welcome tonight's guest, Akasha. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
I am well.
I'm
It's
I'm
so good to
super
see you.
well.
So good to see you. So tell us more about what you do and about yourself. That was just an overall thing, but first explain what is the art of midwifery.
Well, in a nutshell, midwife, she's there to assist others in rites of passage and transitioning. In the scope of birth, that is the transition that a woman goes through, or um, in formal terminology, the perinatal period before birth, conception, and then after birth, as well as different transitions that a woman goes through or a person goes through in their lives, whether that be spiritual. It always ties into spirit at the end of the day. That's how I feel. I feel like my work intersects spirituality and holistic health, but it always goes back to spirit at the end of the day. So a lot of times midwives, they assist with transformative transitions, things that are cathartic, even trauma, because birth itself can be traumatic. And if you ask, a woman her birth story, she might you there's a tale. There's definitely a rabbit hole that you can go down. There's so many amazing experiences, um, and even supernatural phenomena that occurs at birth because you're walking between those two realms.
Tell me more about that. I was not aware that do people remember that? Or is that more like what people see that are being the midwife and nurses just don't catch that stuff because we're in the middle of the hospital and the situation with doctors yelling and things like that.
Yeah, it's a lot going on in the hospital when birth is, yeah, and as it pertains to birth. So one of the roles of a midwife during birth is to keep a woman in her body, because a woman definitely can have, and there are women who have had out of body experiences. It is you're moving between, you're in between the veil or the crossroads, as a woman when you're having birth, you and the baby coming through. And so with that, this is why you have instances sometimes when the unfortunate death of a woman when she is giving birth, that it can be spiritual implications, but it also can be physical implications. Nutrition is a very big part. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, you go there. You definitely go there.
Wow. Wow. So as a
Hmm.
midwife, how do you keep the woman centered? How do you keep them Hi Greg. How do you keep them in their body in that moment?
There are different techniques that we use. Breath being one, because breath is so amazing, because really and truly that is what keeps you grounded. That's what animates your body. When you look up the word spirit etymology, it's spiritus. It means spirit. That's what breath is. And so breath first and foremost, it sounds something that's so, common. It's like, yeah, when you birth in, you breathe, but that can literally set the tone for how a woman carries herself through those contractions, because as it gets closer to the baby facing and coming into the physical world, it gets more and more intense. So breath, massage, touch, aromatherapy, there are a variety of different modalities that I use to keep a woman centered, but those are some of them.
What happens if they lose that centering and they actually leave for a moment, transcend the realms, um, walk, do a walkabout for a while, because I'm sure that happens.
Do a walk. Yeah, and it's because as I say, yeah, you're between those. Well, yeah, that's a ooh, that can be a loaded question now because if you know
Mhm.
the midwifery world, it's a lot of politics. It's a lot of politics since birth became something that the medical industrial complex decided,
Yep.
they wanted to get into because of, the money factor. There's been a yeah, it gets deep. I don't know if I want to scratch the surface with that because that's a whole conversation within itself. But
Yeah.
to answer it in simple terms, when she does their prayers, this is why we have the birth team. We have the midwife, we'll have the birth attendant or doula, the spouse, family members who are there, a few family members who are present and who are grounded enough too. That's why it's important. Everybody who shows up to the birth has to be centered and grounded in their energy because it affects that space and it affects the mother and child. So, mother having that support and having everyone tend to her and pour into her, this is how we keep her centered. And we bring her back. We talk to her, softly, touch her, remind her of her power. We might have her move as well, get up if she can, if she's able to get up and move around, change positions. Birth is a dance. It's a dance. The baby dances to come out. So, yeah, really that movement, that breath.
I'm so glad you brought up the team because so many people have this because like you said, it is the medical science has taken over so many things to make a buck. And I am just, yeah, I'm right with you there.
Yeah.
It's so not, people go, well, is it just the midwife and the mom? Is it the midwife, the mom, and the husband? I'm so glad that you mentioned the team because, in a lot of home births, there are those people that are praying or they're working the oils and because they can't all be doing the same thing at
Yes.
the same time. Everybody has their own specific job.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. They're there for mama and baby. They're there for mama and baby. Absolutely. Absolutely.
how long have you been doing this?
I've been on this I would say since I was 20, I've been on a path of doing womb work and birth work. I started out calling it birth work, but really and truly it is womb work because it's holistic. The world of birth and midwifery, it entails the full circle of life, from birth and even after birth, the raising of the children and the raising of the community and keeping the environment, create an environment where things flourish, where things grow. So I've been on this path about 20 since I was 20. So I would say it's been well over 13 years now.
Wow.
I started out as a lactation counselor. And then I just progressed. I started furthering my education because I became fascinated with just how, the body works with after birth and the amazing thing, how the God is how mothers set us up, to function. And from that it went into, becoming a birth attendant, a doula, and then I furthered my education into midwifery. I mean, a lot of it also it to I want to go back on that question you asked again with the birth team because the ancestors, the spirits, our spirits, our guides, they are also part of the birth team, you know that unseen realm. So making sure that the ancestors are also there, and that energy, spiritually, our guides are here, and keeping the space safe from anything else, trying to come through. I wanted to double back on that because that's also a big aspect, in this work,
I'm
that
so I'm
spiritual
so glad that you
aspect.
called them in. Hi, Joanne. I think that's so cool. May I ask your spirituality or your religion?
Yeah, I would say my spirituality is I'm eclectic, but it is a mix of ancestral practices, as well as different customs from, it all ties back to ancestral practices. It does.
Well, you mentioned the
I'm not
crossroads.
initiated.
You
Right.
mentioned the
I'm not, I wouldn't, I'm
crossroads,
not a, mhm. Yes, I did
and
mention the crossroads. Right.
and to me
Yeah, I
that's
did
like,
mention.
that gets into your old school hoodoo, or even your voodoo, um and so, I'm thinking Papa
Yes.
Legba. So you're bringing in Legba, and you're bringing in that whole team, and you're bringing in, of course, your ancestors as well.
Essentially, exactly. And for me, I'm trained by my elders, but I haven't got it initiated into anything. A lot of my spirits, and that's why I say I always go back to the ancestors. But it is a an eclectic mix of hoodoo, of Santeria, of some voodoo there as well,
Hmm.
from my bloodlines, as well as some Native American, indigenous customs as well. And I haven't gotten initiated in this lifetime. I know there are lifetimes where I was. A lot of my spirits are inherited. They come from my ancestors. My ancestors walk with these spirits. Um, Ultimately, from my spiritual path, I connect with mother most. God is spirituality has That's what I've always come home to.
Hmm.
Connecting with the feminine aspect of the creator. Yeah, so it's that, and I connect with and work with, a few goddesses. They present themselves to me. The women in my family, because a lot of our gifts and everything, they do come down through the blood. A lot of times, usually if you have an oracle or a medium in the family, it's not just one, it's a grandmother, and it's usually the mother, the daughter, the granddaughter. And so the
Sure.
women in my family, they're dreamers. And that's something that I inherited. So a lot of this work that I have done, my ancestors have connected me with certain elders, but a lot of it is, I don't want to say self-taught, but spiritually taught. They come to me in the dream realm.
Mhm.
And it has been a work of learning truly how to trust myself and my higher knowing, because the only time that I've betrayed myself and I've really put myself in situations of, suffering and trauma, apart of from things that were inherited, it was when I didn't listen
Oh,
to that inner voice, when I didn't listen to that, when I didn't listen to the premonition that I had, and what was told to me in a dream, or the notion that I picked up on. So a lot of it has been really like developing that communication with spirit, and understanding when spirit is speaking to me, how spirit is speaking to me, which spirits are there, because you have the trickster spirits, you have
oh yeah.
certain spirits that can cosplay as something that they're not. So yeah, it's really working in the spiritual world is kind of very similar to, learning how to navigate the physical, and communicating and socializing and working amongst
Well, sure,
people.
because a lot of
I
those
feel like
spirits are the
it's
same as, some of them are passed on people. I always tell people, you can be a shit person, you're probably going to be a shit spirit,
yeah,
there's assholes amongst
exactly.
all of us, and when they die, and there's
That's
tricksters
right.
amongst all of us. So,
That's
those same
right.
spirits come back,
That's
and then
right.
there's other realm things that come in, and learning to discern those voices, and learning to discern those gut feelings, and listening to those guts, because man,
Exactly.
every time I've not listened to my gut, boom, it's hit, and I wish it hadn't hit, and I should have listened to it. you know but but
Exactly.
but we live to
Exactly.
tell a great
Precisely.
story. There's always stories to be
Hmm.
told when we're not paying attention to those.
Absolutely.
Woo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a big thing that ties back into midwifery as well. And even with, the witch hunts, and those are old wives' tales, and how this thing, our magic as women, as feminine, was demonized and taken, and usurped. you know um Stories are a big way that we learn and that we teach, in this human experience, and in the practice of midwifery and spirituality. A lot of lessons and things are taught in stories. I feel like it's the
Yes, they
best
are.
form of teaching and learning. It really is. If you can take something, a complex concept, and make it so that a child can understand it. You got it right there. So a lot
Well,
of things I find as I get older. Hmm?
I was just going to say, we also remember better in story form because anything that is
Yes.
colorful, more descript, has voices, has something that our
Yes.
imagination can work, we're going to
Yes.
remember that better than the facts that are taught in a book or just words that somebody says, hey, remember this.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. 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 So
And we're probably more
yeah.
likely to tell the story on more accurately or closer to the original story than if we just pass on a rule that somebody's told us that we have to remember,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know.
And sometimes the stories can change some. The core of the story, the meat and bones can be the same, but sometimes the surface may change a little bit, you know.
Sure.
Sometimes
Sure.
even for instance, like the protagonist and the antagonist, they actually might switch roles, but it's still those initial roles that's being played out, you know.
Yep. Yep. And I
Mhm.
think we also see it's
Yeah.
easier to see ourselves in those stories. You know, we don't always pick the easiest character to see ourselves in if it's a story being told. You know, it's easier to go, oh man,
Mm.
that sounds like something I would do. You know, so you
Mhm.
can actually be more critical of yourself during a story and not feel so bad.
Mhm. Mhm. Indeed.
So that's
Indeed.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, we
Uh,
see ourselves. Yeah, I think that's why we also love stories, because we see ourselves in these different characters. And ultimately these characters are their archetypes, their spirits, their foundational spirits, you know, that these dynamics lay the fabric of our existence, you know, and these things can't happen without there being certain archetypes and energies that play a part in, you know, creating these dynamics that we they'll always be the best teachers.
right. Right. And we see ourselves in more than one role too, which I think is really nice for us
Right.
to be able to view that like, holy crap, I'm the bad guy in this story, but I'm also the hero in this story and I can be both at the same time.
Right. You can hold space for both of them. Yeah. And you don't need
Yes.
to demonize one over the other. You
Right.
know, a lot
Because
of
we
times
shouldn't be doing
we're
that
taught,
anyway.
right, exactly. A lot of times we're taught to, you know, run away from those aspects. But I think, you know, when it comes to, you know, creating things that can be unhealthy and unbalanced, that comes from trying to rid ourselves or ignore, you know, primal things about us, you know, natural things about us. I always say when it comes to, you know, the realms of emotions, it's not the emotion that is wrong, you know. I don't think you should feel guilty for feeling a certain way, but you are responsible for how you behave and respond,
Yes.
you know, based on how
Exactly.
you're feeling.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, and you know, there's
Yeah.
a time and a place, and I'm sure if you know, you'll understand what I'm saying. Some of the viewers may not, but the left
Mhm.
and right hand work. I think we beat ourselves up when
Okay.
we're forced to do some left hand work, but sometimes it's necessary. You know, like not everything is good. And sometimes there are bad things that happen and there are
Right.
bad choices that made that have to be shut down. And accountability is one of those
Agreed.
things, you know.
Yes, agreed. I agree. And I think what is when it comes to what they call left hand work, I definitely feel like if it can be justified, because again, you know, if you have to, you know, protect yourself, or I felt if something like egregious, you know, a major violation was done, and you know, in these days, uh, you know, when people tend to rely on, you know, and it's no shade, but It is what it is. When people tend to rely on, what is justice to, take care of something fairly, a lot of the time the system has failed
Oh,
people.
absolutely.
So then what do you do? Yeah. So then what do you do? Are you just gonna sit around and be a victim? Because I'm not for that.
I'm not either.
I'm over
I,
that victimhood. I feel like we all have a victim and a victim and a critic, and they want so much attention, and it's like, no,
no.
you
Take
gotta no.
I'm empowered. I take care of that shit, shut the door, and it's one and done. And I mean, I don't go
Period.
around doing that because somebody pulled out in front of me in a traffic. That's
Right.
reserved for big things, big guns. And you brought up your ancestors. You always talk to your spirits before you do anything like that. But
Mm-hmm. That's right. You
oh
always consult the ancestors, always consult the spirits.
yeah, yeah, you have to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Exactly. And it comes there, like you said, back to accountability. It definitely comes with a responsibility. You don't just go around throwing your power and, and busting out your guns for no reason. It has to be something really, really serious. It's a serious thing. So yeah, as a practitioner, it's responsibility. It
Right.
really it comes down to that. Yeah. You have to be very responsible.
So crisis management as a midwife and as a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual coach. What
Mm-hmm.
toolkits, what like I doing paranormal and working with cleansing people. I have what I call an oh shit kit. It's my backup kit. I call in my
Okay.
spirits. I hold my four corners. I do all my crafty things and my spirit guide things. And when I really get, desperate, I'll light up my altars and I fire up things, and there's things that I can work. But my oh shit
Mhm.
kit is a metaphysical kit that I can grab really quick, that's got like my go-tos for when shit's going to get deep and bad really quick.
Mhm. Mhm.
What is in your oh shit kit spiritually when you're working births or you're working any kind of spiritual thing?
Well, my oh shit kit is a mix of spiritual as well as physical forces of nature. Usually my number one is the plants and the waters. Um so for instance, an oh shit kit for, the spiritual space as far as the spiritual hygiene of the environment. I'm going to have my juniper. I have blends that I make. Of course, you got to have sage too. Apart from, just the basics, sage is also excellent for cleansing the environment of literal bacteria and viruses. It gets away.
Yes.
Sage kills like about, 90, I think something like 95% of bacteria, fungi, viruses that are in the area. So of course I have to have my sage, but my juniper, that's one of my favorites. Juniper is also known as cedar wood. That's also very purifying. Lemongrass, dragon's blood, frankincense and myrrh, copal. I always have a little bit of that. I'll have some ifun or some cascarilla. um and for health for women, because a big thing with birth is nutrition and muscle tone. You have to be toned. They don't call it labor for any reason. Like your body is literally doing some serious work, and a lot of women's health conditions can be mitigated easy with proper nutrition and proper movement and exercise. If you don't like to, necessarily do traditional exercise, and dancing is very big. So I would have my red raspberries. I'm gonna have my nettles. I'm gonna have my motherwort, my shepherd's purse, herbs that are gonna keep the blood in the body. I might have some payal. I already some my red clover. So definitely herbs, my moxa, things that are going to keep the blood and the heat in a woman's body. Like that's a big thing. A lot of times women are scared of bleeding out. Um, Bleeding too much or hemorrhaging is also a big thing with women having, a serious health issues with birthing. So kit.
Are you when you take on a client, are you usually with them from the
Mhm.
very beginning, or do you take on people partway through or even at the end, because to me that would be like, I know from being a nurse, the health histories you get from people are not always accurate. So I mean, they can tell you they're
Right,
eating healthy and
exactly.
they're doing all these healthy things, but that's not usually the case.
No, but that's where my assessment comes in as a practitioner, because all of my clients get an assessment, from no matter which stage I take them. Most of the time it's earlier or in the second trimester. That's usually the most common. But I've had a few that I've taken that is closer to birth, because they absolutely needed it, and I knew they would be able to handle it. It's also a mixture of intuition. Sometimes there might be a client that it's like, I don't think we would, my services will work well for you, or her energy doesn't mesh with me. Being honest, you don't always have to. You have to be able to discern. You know,
Yes.
you have to be able to discern.
How do they take it when you tell them that's not a mesh? I mean, do most people have the ability to interpret that and say, maybe I kind of screwed up on this one and waited a little too
And
long,
for the
or
most part, I mean, it's not a common thing. It's only been a few times. But they've taken it easy though. They've taken it easy, and they know that they're actually not ready for it, because I'm the real deal, and it's because birth, it's also when a woman is ready to go, because it's cute. That's the thing over the past years, and 2020 had a lot to do with it as well, especially how the medical system was. I'm not sure if you were still in the field during that time,
oh
but
yeah,
even
the
the
beginning of
nurses were going
COVID.
through a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, the C word. I don't
the
so
C
I don't know how that
word.
works on this platform, saying certain words. I don't know how
No,
the
we're not
algorithm works.
limited.
But yeah, during that
We are
time.
not limited.
Okay, cool. Oh,
That's
excellent.
why we're on this
Excellent.
platform.
Okay, excellent. So a lot of people started getting into midwifery and traditional birthing practice a lot during that time. But it also almost became a trend too. It's become a trend lately, like, oh yeah, I have a doula or a midwife or a birth worker, like like it's cute, like it's sexy. But it's like, yo, this is the real deal. When you choose to birth this way, you're taking accountability and true
Oh yeah, you are.
autonomy over your body. You're standing in your sovereignty. Are you really ready for this? Or when we get midway through, you're gonna start crying, and getting scared. And it's not to shame or shade, because I've had my births. I have several different. My birth story varies, and I'm a mother of five. And so it's really important that when I assess the woman, apart from her physically, her mental state, her emotional and physical state, is she really ready for this?
Right, right. Yeah, because
Hmm.
wow. I think of, I had two babies, and neither one of them could have been delivered normally because my I had cephalopelvic disproportion. So babies didn't drop, nothing
Hmm.
happened. But we tried on the first one. We tried for hours of forceps and
Hmm.
suction, and like all those traumatic things that should never have been done either. And I think, you
Right.
know, being a nurse, I would have so loved to have had a midwife. That would not have
Hmm.
worked for
Hmm.
me. That would have gone bad very, very quickly. Um, but I
So
also
you have
don't
a
believe
smaller
in. I'm not one of
pelvis.
these. Yeah, so I didn't have a nothing was built internally the way it should have been built. I was tipped, and
Okay.
nothing would have fit through the canal. Like yeah, my first one had a big cone head, and it was sad, and it was very traumatic.
Yeah, when bigger babies, yeah, you probably needed some more conditioning. I mean, some conditioning. I feel like, again, back to as I was saying, you see amazing things happen with birth. Even in instances, it's very normal. You have women who have smaller pelvises and bigger babies. So, that's part of my training, to realize that. But there are some instances where a woman, she has to go to the hospital, but you be surprised. But as you said, I'm sure you've learned from that experience. It's all, we can't judge our birth stories. We can
No,
learn from them. Yeah, I feel like we learn from them. They're there to teach us.
yes,
They're
yes.
there to ultimately empower us.
And that's a big thing with people too, is you hear such horrific stories, and I screamed all the way through, and it's like, well, I come from the world of nurses. What nurse would have let you scream all the way through? That's just like,
Right.
that's so traumatic for the baby and so traumatic for you
Yeah, and you can
you know
rupture something screaming too much. Yeah, you give yourself a hemorrhage, and yeah, you have to. Again, that goes back to that centering. It's a lot of education it's coming into the forefront about birthing, or I would say more things. They're coming back into remembrance rather. They may have been underground for a little while, but the knowledge never left. So.
I think that's a real important thing. We have forgotten so much from our ancestors and from our past lives. I mean, we really have. And I think we're starting to awaken, and I think there's a lot of reasons we're awakening. Number one,
Yes,
because it's needed, because it's needed now. you know um
I
but
agree.
the veil is thinning, and we're starting to wake up, and I think we're going to have to go back to, if you will, the older ways, the more clean ways, the less equipment and industrialized ways. We're going to have to, because
I agree.
it's not working. COVID
I
showed us that.
agree. It's not. It did. It did. It did. It did. And even in a sense, it's I that's really layered. What you just said. Um, I feel like when COVID happened, because I'm a millennial, I'm a 90s baby. And so I had my Saturn return right before COVID happened. So when COVID happened, it kind of was like a breeze to me in a sense. And I think for those of us who are already on a spiritual path, a different walk from the status quo. When COVID happened, it kind of was like a quantum leap for us, for those of us who are already on a specific frequency. And then for those who are still, on that frequency of, giving up their power, of fear, of trusting in what, the so-called government, is saying, even though we know what we know.
Right. Well, we knew that
It
before, though. Those of
Right,
us who were on that
exactly. That was
level,
like we knew that.
we
Right.
we knew, we didn't trust those. I'm telling you, those spiritual workers, that and enlightenment people. I'm not, whatever you want to call them, metaphysical world. Those people that ran right out and got their shots, they didn't listen.
Yeah.
They did
It's
not
separated.
listen.
I feel like it's separated the real from the fake. I'll just say it
Yes.
like that. I'm gonna just say it
I've
frankly.
got one old
Yeah.
lady. What she's one of my dear friends. I call her an old lady. She's funny. She goes, "You are not a pumpkin spice witch." And I'm like, I had never heard that before, and I looked at her. She goes, the pumpkin spice lattes, the pumpkin spice candles, and look, I get to put on my little witchy hat, and I get to play witch for the weekend. And I'm like, I'd never heard that before. Pumpkin spice witch. I love that.
Yeah,
No.
that's funny. Yeah, that's right.
No.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So, right, those of us who know, it was like two different frequencies. I feel like it's like that even now. Everybody's all is all this hoopla about, the recent elections and everything, and who's in office now, when, it's gonna still be the same agendas that are going on. Of course, it might be flavored a little differently, whether it's left wing or right wing, but I feel like same bird,
It
so
is, isn't
it's
it?
like,
Isn't it?
mhm,
Thank you. It
mhm,
is the same person's people in power,
yeah,
regardless of who's up front.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so, don't. I always tell people, don't believe anything you see on TV or on Facebook or media.
It's
Just
become so obvious now. It's like you're really. I do my best not to come off as judgmental, but it's like, I know you're not falling for that crap. Like, you can't tell me that you seriously come on now. They're playing in your faces. Like, you really can't say, okay, okay,
It's a
it's
game.
like,
It is a game.
it is. And I find that more as I mature, and get older or better and wiser. It's like I'm more in like my sage mode where I'm becoming more masterful in things, but I'm not taking life too seriously. I still have that childlike approach. My children help with that too. I have ages range from 15 to 3 months. And so, I'm experiencing, children at different
Woo!
developmental stages. And yeah, and
Oh,
so
good
it is,
Lord.
it's fun too. Yeah, I know. It's serious
Woo!
business. It's serious business, but it's fun. I know how to keep it, I know how to keep things light, but I feel like, it's different frequencies, and you could literally be in the same room as someone, but y'all are in like two different realities.
Maybe
That's the point. I
more.
feel like,
Maybe more.
yeah, yeah, but everybody's is definitely obvious that people are operating on in different realities. So,
Oh,
I don't
good.
think it's a time of fear. I think it's a time of great awakening and opportunity. And those of us who, I feel like it's great for those of us who are spiritualists. The spiritualists, the wellness workers, the holistic workers, the witches, the sorcerers, the practitioners, whatever you identify as. I really feel like it's our time, like you said, because it's needed. We can't. It's not sustainable. The trajectory that this world has been on, or the system, it's not sustainable.
No,
And
it
so
is
if it
not.
crashes, if or when it crashes, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna lose your head? Like, if they decide to do another, COVID or whatever, are you gonna lose your head? Or are you gonna be able to ride the wave and actually create opportunity from these things that are happening?
Well, for sure, for sure. And I think
Hmm.
anybody can go to the store and see, or go out in public and see that so many people are still actively living in fear. Like you watch them, it's smash and grab in grocery stores still. I mean, bad weather's coming, or somebody says, oh, this little virus is going to be out there, and everybody's filling shopping carts.
Yeah.
And the looks on
Hmm.
their faces and the way they treat other people, it is so fear based.
It is. It is. It is. It is. You
And
can
it's
see
like,
it. You can see it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, people
Yeah.
need to kind of, you can't, I learned a long time ago, you can't make somebody drag along with you. You can't drag people along with you. You cannot make somebody raise their vibration. All we can do is raise ours and work on ourselves and hope people go, hey, that's pretty cool. Let me tag along. But they have to do the work
That's right.
themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. That's right. And we have, and I'm tapping into that more. I think I'm at this stage, because that's the thing. When I started, it's so funny, even back to the I'm not a pumpkin spice witch, I definitely don't I come from some very powerful matriarchs, but even like when I made the decision that I was gonna walk this path, what I thought it was at, 19, 20, and then now at 34, it's like there's been so much growth. And right when I think, I've gotten to a certain level, it's like something else spirit reveals. Like, oh, you thought you knew something? No, you don't know anything. So it's like, I'm an everlasting student too. Um, and I'm at this place now where I realize, like, you have an effect on, I'm getting more in my collective mind now. And perhaps it's because we've shifted, over into this Aquarian age, but how your energy can really have an effect on your environment around you.
Oh, yes.
Literally, you vibrating high, and you have your spiritual technology. That thing sends out energy into the field and can affect, meters, kilometers
Everybody,
past. So it's like, yeah, how we're all
everybody
connected to this
around you.
biofield. Yeah. And so taking responsibility to that, because, like, listen, we are, it's power in numbers. And even if it's just a few numbers that are in that in a in their frequency, and they're coming together, it's you can create a lot with that force being
Yes.
tapped into its true source of
Well,
power.
and people worry about, well, I'm only changing one person myself at a time. That one person, like you said, has enough energy and power. If you're changing yourself, then you're affecting, maybe not changing, but you're affecting everybody around you.
Yes, yes, you're an
You know,
affecting.
I mean,
Agreed. Yep, you're
go to the grocery store and put on a smile and smile at people and say hi. And it's amazing the number of people that will do a double take and then they'll smile and go, well, oh, hi. Or somebody
yep,
says one thing nice, or you compliment somebody and they come out of their shell and they're like, oh my gosh, you've just changed their energy for the day. People don't
yes,
people don't
that's
realize
right.
all that's free exchange right there. Like, we are raising the vibe by those little things that we do.
Yes, exactly. And it's a responsibility as a spiritualist that comes with that. You don't have to go out and be, oh yeah, I'm gonna do some work and heal you, because that's energy. But like you said, the small things, and I'm noticing that, those little nudges, my spirit would give me sometimes to, talk to her, say something to him before I'll be like, I don't, because I don't want to
Hmm.
make people feel uncomfortable. But I realize these are my spirits are like, no, you're supposed to spread this. Like, you've gotten to the point where you've been working this, you're moving between realms, you're bringing things back, you're bringing wisdom back, you're bringing healing back. Like, it's time for you to share that. You have to share
Yep.
some of that too. Yeah,
And you open the door just with simple kindness acts. People
that's
say,
right.
how do you start? It's kindness.
It goes a long way, a long, long way.
And it's so free. It's
It
so
is. It is
free.
so free. Yep, free. That's part of the natural beauty in life. That's the simplicity. Some people confuse like simple things in life with basic, but it's like it's so much depth and simplicity. I'm over here in Hot Springs, so I like to frequent like the trails, up in the national park, and they have several, around the area too, and walking in the mountains. And these things are simple. Nature is simple, but she's so beautiful and magnificent in her simplicity. You have the oak tree, and then, might have wildflowers growing on the bottom. Then you have herbs here growing in. Those things are simple. They're free, but they're so beautiful and rich. Like, we have to tap
Yes.
into that around. It's all around us. You say it's so free. It's so free. And all you got to do is just literally tap in. It doesn't.
Sure. Sure. And not have fear, not, again, not allowing the fear space in the mind, because to me, thought, word, and deed, that's the fear comes from an inner thing, that maybe an inner trauma, or inner lack of empowerment, where we somebody's put that reel in our head, or maybe we've put it in ourselves, that we're not good enough, or nobody's going to accept us. But that ability to say, it doesn't matter whether that person accepts my smile, or accepts my hug, or accepts my whatever, I'm putting it out there. It's still going to rent space at the end of
That's
the day in
right.
someone else's head. So,
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that act, because our actions and our thought, that action, thought, deed, that puts out a vibration into the atmosphere. That creates a resonance, and that does come back to you as
yeah,
well too. So, not that we're, yeah, so that either way, it's still love is love. It's gonna create, harmony, and there's and benefit of that. And as far as, with, like you were saying, with fear, I feel like that's where spiritual hygiene comes in. Spiritual hygiene is very important. Um, Keeping your mind, and your spirit clean, keeping yourself a clear channel, so it's not just about, of course, because you got people out there who might try to throw things, and it's just, it's just stuff all out there. It's things that you can pick up on, or things that can try to latch on to you, apart from, somebody trying to intentionally throw something at you. But fear, those energies, that's when you keep yourself, your spiritual hygiene on point, it keeps away that type of energy and those type of mindsets too. It keeps away the fear.
Sure it does. Well, sure it does. And why do
Mhm.
people throw? Because they're jealous and because they're fearful
Mm.
themselves.
Yes,
100%. I mean, they're not throwing at
that
you
goes
because,
back.
well, maybe they are. Maybe some people get thrown at because they're doing bad things to other people. But most of the time it's because of ego and jealousy, and you've got to keep your ego intact, and you've got to keep your empowerment and ego are two separate things. And a lot of people haven't learned that yet,
Yep, yep,
you know? So,
yep.
yeah, like always
Indeed.
cleaning yourself and being aware of what's around you and having protection.
That's right. And having protection. Yeah, because I find even though we know ourselves, there are people, a lot of these people out here who don't know themselves, I feel like they walk around carrying spirits on them and they don't even realize it. Like somebody doesn't even have to be a practitioner to
Oh
throw
gosh, no.
something at you. Evil lie, like our grandmothers, used to tell us, and mother, evil lie is a real thing. People coming around and gathering and speaking, ill about someone, that's a curse. Whether they look at it like that or not, that's still working energy.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, you never know. It could be coming. You could be minding your business. You at the store, like you said, somebody jealous, or there might be a misunderstanding, or you might have brushed up against somebody and they looking at you crazy. They not realizing they sending energy towards you. So yeah, just
Well, yeah.
you keeping that self clear. Yeah, keeping your temple clear. You have to be a clear channel. Yeah, and you have to do it on a regular. I've realized that as I've moved forward, I can't, on a regular, on a weekly basis. I'm cleansing myself on a daily
Oh, for
basis.
sure.
I do the
Daily.
same thing for my
I was
children.
gonna say.
Yeah, on a daily. Yeah, on a daily. And then weekly. You do your deeper cleanses. It's just like how I clean my house. How we were raised. You maintain the house throughout the week or throughout the strong, and when it comes to the ends of the week, you do a deep cleaning like we always do. Saturday cleaning is a big thing in my culture. I don't know if it's in your culture, but in my culture, in most black households, melanated households, like Saturday cleaning is a big thing, and that's when you do like the deep thorough cleaning. So that's how my spiritual practices are the same way too. I do my daily
Good.
cleansing throughout the week, and then Saturday, Sunday, I pull out the big stuff. I might just do a couple of spiritual baths, for a couple of days, do some deep cleansing, and you know, it's really
Have
important.
you passed that on to your kids? Like, do your kids do that too? Do they have the spiritual practices? Have they embraced that?
Absolutely. Well, embrace. I mean, at this point, they feel like they don't have any choice. I don't force them, but they know it's a daily part. Yeah, it is a daily part of our our routines. It is a definitely a part of our family rituals and routines. Like my children do what I do as well. They take spiritual baths. I give them spiritual baths on a weekly basis. I like to keep on my bar, like by the front door. I keep like a small shrine that has like different oils and different spiritual colognes and sprays, and I have them always put that on, and my younger ones, I anoint their heads and speak power and love over them before they leave to school. And then when they
Oh,
come
good.
home, it's the same thing. They come home, it's like, up, stop there, you cleanse yourself. And it's just it's practices that to keep them mindful and things like that. And I find that even they themselves, because children, we have the longest childhood as humans in this human experience. That's because we live the longest. So they still, they have their childlike ways and their childish ways, but I even find that they themselves, they're aware to a certain point where it's like, I think I'm gonna go take a soak today. I think I'm gonna do a salt bath. I won't even have to tell
Good.
them. They'll just feel like their energy just needs, some buffering.
That's awesome. What
Yeah.
a neat practice. Now, tying this into the midwifery, do you teach your new mamas to do that with the babies too?
Oh, absolutely. We do a ceremony. We do, I do a blessing over the baby's head. A lot of my families are tuned in. Like one of my favorite ones, like the father, he'll come and he'll smudge around the baby and speak life and speak prayers over the baby. The grandmother, she's what,
Mm.
we call, like what they call in the black church, like a prayer warrior, because the power of a tongue is a real thing. And the grandmother always, even before we go in and birth, she'll come and she'll pray over us, and she'll anoint us as well. And things. Yeah, so I definitely, that's a part of the practice, absolutely.
I love that. I
Hmm.
absolutely love that.
Yeah.
That is so neat. Like the whole concept of praying over and anointing and bringing in the grandmother, because that is the like she's got more power than everybody in that room, whether she
That's
realizes
the
it or not.
matriarch.
That is the
That's right.
matriarch.
That's the matriarch. That's the matriarch. Yes.
And
That's the
she's got
matriarch.
those ancestors are strong with her, and they know it.
Yes. 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 Our elders are so, 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 so important. Our elders. From the time I was a young girl, I always enjoyed being around older people. And even I find when I was going through a lot of transitions, in life as a young mother, it was always an elder woman who would speak life over me, that would give me that, you know, that would invigorate me, in times where I was being hard on myself and critical, because my family was very critical. I think most spiritualists, not to say like that, but I think we've all been through our trauma. Some of us more than others, because it's really kind of what leads us on the path. To be a
It
healer,
does.
healers go through some shit. Okay,
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we
healers
do.
we go through
Yeah,
some
we
shit.
do.
Yeah,
Some
yeah, and
self-caused.
so
Some
yes,
self-caused because we had to go those
yes, some of
paths
it,
to learn what we had to
right, and
learn.
some,
I mean,
that's right, that's
learn
right,
by
right,
experience. Shit.
yep,
I was
yeah.
one of those that you can tell me I had to learn by the school of hard knocks. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. Indeed. And so, yeah, I have my share. So, my family is very critical of me, and some of it is ancestral too, the things that we go through. Sometimes it is inherited. Sometimes I feel like it's a mixture of that. I feel like it's a mixture of karmic things, ancestral dynamics, as well as, like you said, your own, because you come in, your soul comes in to learn and to master, aspects of itself, so that you can grow and expand too. So it's a mixture of that. For me, it's been very heavy on the ancestral part, and pertaining to the women in my family, and them really stepping into their powers, because a lot of them, they are oracles, even though they won't identify, say it like that. I even have an aunt, she's a pastor. She has dreams too. She has a lot of premonitions. She'll say, oh, it's, God, Jesus sends it to her, but we know what it is. Even she
Yes, we
wears
do.
all
Yeah,
white
we
too,
do.
which I
You're
I
right.
right, we know what it is, but I find it really interesting because she said, God told her, gave her a dream, and told her to wear all white. And this is a West African woman, and because my mother's people they're West African and Congolese, and I find it interesting because when you look at dynamics like in ATRs, African traditional religions, indigenous,
Yeah.
wearing white is a big thing in Voodoo and Euro in Ifa or Santeria,
I was gonna
Lukumi.
say, if yes.
Yes, wearing white is a big thing, and I found it interesting that her getting that channel, again, she calls it Christ, or whatever she wants to identify it as. I'm like, I know where those gifts are coming from,
Right.
but as far as like stepping up, I feel like those primordial ways came through with my generation. A lot of the women in my family, they're still, and many women too, and I don't think they realize how, women don't realize how it is our power that really fuels a lot of these religions, in these patriarchal religions. It is the feminine power. In church they'll say Holy Spirit, and in Judaism, they talk about the Shekinah. But all of these things are the feminine. This is the goddess, and they just try to, put her in and rebrand her. But it's her energy that's really fueling it. Women don't understand, I feel like a lot of women, it's no shade, but I feel like a lot of women give their power away when it comes to religion, unless it's a woman that's just more spiritual at her core, and she chooses to practice a religion, but she's more spiritual. Because I've met some religious people that are really cool and really down to earth, and you know they live more Christ like, you know uh than the person who is the self, oh, I'm the Christian, and Bible toe in, and things like that. Sometimes I
No,
find like
no.
the most, yeah, so yeah, it's a
Well,
lot of
and
layers
the
with that.
women drive the cults too. We wouldn't have the
Yes.
cults if the women weren't supporting those men up in the cults.
Yes.
You don't see a lot of feminine
Yes.
or female cult
Yes.
leaders. They're
Yes.
men taking advantage of that feminine power again that the women have given them. We gave up our power for that.
Yes. It's the same thing in the midwifery world too, because the realm of birth in the medical arts or the healing arts and sciences, that was taught amongst the priestesses, and even spiritual knowledge. Like women, there was a time when women were the spiritual authority, and then certain things were taught to men. And it wasn't because they were less than, but it's just, one of my teachers, when I went on this past, Dr. Phil Valentine, he says design denotes structure. No, design denotes function. We're designed a certain way, and it's very intricate, it's complex, it's unique. We both bring something special to the table, but as far as how we're designed, even as women, me, the reason what led me to God is spirituality. Because when I look at it, I said, well, no matter if you can look at the story again, back to stories, you can look at the story like, okay, there was a father god. You can actually look at the story as there's a mother god, because as you go back into spirit is more androgynous. There
Yes.
is no gender, so you can look at it either way. But just looking at it practically, right, I would say that the creator would be more feminine, or the creator tapped into its feminine aspect first in order to birth, right? Because men don't birth. We have portals. Our yonis between our legs, this is a portal. And Vudan, one of the symbols, um is a phallus coming out of a yoni, in West African voodoo.
Yes.
And that ties into legba and things like that. But yeah, there is a phallus that is coming out of the yoni. So it is that feminine energy that births, begins that separation from the XX, and then you have the XY,
Right.
right, which is the male. So it's like, yeah, big mama. Like big mama energy it's a real thing. And I've learned that on this path too, as a mom. It's a lot. It is a lot. It's a position of authority. It really is. Some women don't look at it like that. And again, I think that's because of the patriarchy and the taking of our power. And again, there's been like a fragmentation of feminine energy. You have that triple goddess, right? The maiden, mother, crone. I look at it astrologically as Saturn, Venus, and the moon. um, but patriarchy has kind of split that, where women are made to feel like we can only operate out of one aspect. And it's like, no, we're actually the original fluid beings. We are the original fluid beings. We can move. You can be all of those things. I am maiden, I'm mother, I'm crone, but there's something about matriarch, mama crone. She's been there, done that. She's been the maiden. She has
She's
all of
been
this
everything.
wisdom. She's been everything. So that is what I've had to tap into in order to elevate myself in life. And it has given meaning and understanding to why I've been through the things that I've been through, and how I found myself on this path.
Wow. That's very
So I
like
know I said a mouthful.
that was very deep. That was very layered. That's but
Yeah.
it is so true. Like, and it just it kills me like when I do readings on for women, which is most of my clients are women.
Hmm.
Most of my Reiki clients are men. It's kind of funny
Okay.
how it goes both back and forth. But my readings
Yes.
are women. But my job seems to be with everybody to empower the females. They have lost their power. They've
Yes.
lost their power. People trauma, drama. has taken their power away from them, or they have given willingly their power.
Yes.
And you know, if I could get any message to anyone, it would be like, don't give your power away to anyone. Don't just don't do it. Don't, you know,
Hmm.
it's you are one of the most powerful beings on the planet.
That's right. Don't
And
betray yourself.
don't,
Yeah,
because we are bold, brave, and beautiful
that's
every
right.
every minute of the day. Even in our weakest moment, we are still trying, like, we're trying to be that parent and that worker and that guardian and that, you know, every
Yep.
single hat at one time. And that,
Right.
you know,
Yes. Many, many hats, many, many pots on the stove, or many cauldrons. Shit.
many cauldrons. Well, we got the cauldrons in the back room while the pots are on the stove, and we're feeding our kids
Okay.
at the same time because they were a little bit hungry before the meal was ready.
Okay. That's right. That's right. That's right. You got that right.
Got to keep it all going. Man, this hour has flown.
Yes. It definitely has. I was looking like it's 10:02 already.
I know. See, that's what I said. This coffee hour to me is just, it just flies. You know, it just like,
Yes.
it just flies. Akasha, thank you so much for being on my show tonight.
Thank you, Julie. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure
Pleasure.
having you. My heart is full. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out on the Facebook comments or the YouTube comments, and I will be checking them and getting to Akasha if there's any questions, and she can send me links and we can post up more links. If you have a website that you want linked to besides Wild Rose Society,
Mm-hmm.
please text that to me and we'll get it up tomorrow on the YouTube page and the website so people can get a hold of you.
Okay, I'll
I
send
can't
you my link tree.
thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you guys
Okay.
so much for joining us, Akasha. It was beautiful.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful. Um,
Peace.
Peace out, guys. Thank you so much. I guess I started to use my other computer to shut this down, and I'm up on a tablet. Night, y'all. See y'all next Sunday.
All right. Good night. Peace,
Good night.
everyone. All right.